志明。那我们就准备开始了。说英文，没有翻译，全英文。Good morning. We are start our COP27 set event of the United States conference in Egypt. Our topic today is a voluntary commitment and global collaboration on climate change and biodiversity synergies. I'm Daniel Hou Yuanqing from China Green Carbon Foundation. Right now, I would like to briefly introduce our section. This set event will invite international and domestic enterprise, think tanks, universities, researchers, institutions, international organizations, and NGOs to attend, promote the achievement of ecological protection and restoration, forestry and grassland to scope climate change and biodiversity conservation. In China, through the participation of the experts and scholars from the enterprises, think tanks, university research institutions, international organizations, foundations, and other NGOs from Africa, China, Europe, and the American regions. The event focuses on discussing non-state actors' volunteer contributions and promotes nature-based solutions and global collaboration on climate change and biodiversity, and how to promote the collaborative efforts among governments, social organizations, enterprises, industries, and the public at home and abroad to jointly achieve the synergies in addressing climate change and biodiversity conservation. This set event is hosted by China Green Carbon Foundation, Shanshui Conservation Center, Global Environmental Institute, SEE Foundation, and the Wangke Foundation, and also co-organized by International Union for Climate Conservation of Nature, World Nature Resources Defense Council, the Nature Conservancy, Wildlife, CICF Foundation, China Environmental Grant Makers Islands, and Protect Nature Area Islands of Public Affairs, and also African CSO Biodiversity Islands and African Wildlife Foundation. Right now, I'm so glad to invite Mr. Wang Yi, Professor of Institute of Science and Development, Chinese Academy of Sciences, NPC Standing Committee, give us the opening remarks. Mr. Wang Yi, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hou. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Wang Yi from Chinese Academy of Sciences. So thank you very much for organizer to invite me to give address, speech here. And first of all, I would like to congratulate the opening of very important side events and the synergy of the biodiversity conservation and climate change addressing. So I think it's very, very important. I would like to mention the 3 points. The first one, I think we should recognize the new feature of the negotiations for both biodiversity conservation and climate change. I think since last year, the first phase of COP15 and also the COP27, there are major concept, maybe features. It's a synergy, and also to make the balance between ambitious goal and concrete action. And I think it's very important. And also, make a balance between conservation and the sustainable use of natural resources, including the biodiversity-related resources. I think it's very important. That's our first one. Second one, I think climate change, production and biodiversity conservation should learn each other. And especially, I think, comparatively, I think climate change negotiation got great achievements than the biodiversity conservation. So I think we should think about some key issues. The first one is targets. So for climate change, we have a very clear carbon targets. It's based on the MRV. But for the biodiversity, in some way, maybe it's very difficult to have a physical model to calculate, to forecasting the scenario. So I think maybe biodiversity, we can think about this one. For example, the 30-30 targets for the past 2020 biodiversity conservation framework. And the second one is how to set up the implementation and action. I think this year for the COP27, we think it's year for implementation because last year we approved the Glasgow Climate Pact. So this year, I think almost stop and finish all the detailed negotiation on the implementation of the Article 6 and different articles of the Paris Agreement. So I think this year's implementation. And how to implementation? It's also very important for the biodiversity conservation. For example, the chair just mentioned about the NBS, nature-based solution. We think about the nature positive economy. So we must make a balance between, the conservation and the development model, maybe the green transition of development patterns. And so how to make the current development model a pattern to a new nature-based approach or positive development model, I think is very important. And because up to now, almost half of global GDP rely on highly on the nature and the ecosystem. So I think the second one. The third one is policy, supporting policy. And especially the finance issues, I think, not only for the climate change, but also for the biodiversity conservation. Because this year, we talk about the finance issues. The first one, we must let the developed country to realize their commitment. And maybe the 10 billion US dollars, and it's not achieved. And also think about the double money for the adaptation. And the new topic is the loss and damage. Even up to now, we don't have the very clear concept, the scope, and also the mechanism. So we must think about, how to establish this kind of a financial mechanism for adaptation and also for the loss and damage, including the biodiversity conservation. So that's a third point for each other, learning each other between biodiversity and climate change. Finally, I think for the civil society, you could very big, very important, play very important roles for push the synergy of biodiversity conservation and climate change. I think we have some priorities. The first one is we must co-build the better governance, of the two issues, especially biodiversity conservation and climate change, and we must rule-based. So that's why the past 2020 framework is so very important, including the targets and the implementation measures. The second point, I think, we should have a new management system because relate to the biodiversity conservation is trans sectors, including civil society could play a very important role. So I think how to make this kind of management, in the sustainable way we must think about. You know, the next March, Chinese government will restructuring, and maybe we should give a more clear responsibility to different sectors, and also civil society will take some responsibility for the biodiversity conservation. The third one, I think, we must have a new land maybe layout for the spatial planning, because around the different targets, like will increase our ability for the adaptation, and also for the carbon sink, especially for the ecosystem, and also for some biomass and some biological energy issues, and also for the renewable development, because we are in China. The total in the 2060, I think the total renewable will account for about over 5 terawatts. It's a huge system, but it will use much land. So how to make this kind of a land system reform, and also we use mix land use policy, I think is also very important. The fourth one, I think we should establish a sustainable trading and green supply chain, especially for the agriculture and the forest products, and it's over the country, over trajectory. So I think this is also very important, even we're in a very complicated geopolitical challenge, but we must think about how to change our WTO rules, and also put environmental, including the biodiversity conservation, in this kind of rules or policy. The fifth, I think, would be the research. Yeah, up to now, I think the research is not enough, including the data and the information system. When we talk about anything, for example, trading, up to now we don't have a unified database. Each organization has used a different data and has a totally different result. So we must think about how to establish this kind of a database and the information platform. Last one, I think, is also very important, is cooperation. Including international cooperation, including the governmental, private sector, and the civil society cooperation, and also the cooperation among civil societies. I think also in the future you will play more and more important roles, and we can take action from now on. So thank you very much, and I wish this side event complete success. Thank you very much.
Thank you a lot, Professor Wang Yi. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce one of our co-organization, Yuanqing Foundation, the executive board member at Yuanqing Foundation, Ms. Chen Yimei. Please.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to represent the Yuanqing Foundation to speak today. And actually, it's an even much greater pleasure to have joined the Beijing Green Carbon Foundation, SEE, SEI, and Shanshui, and a few other organizations to come up with this side event. And the Yuanqing Foundation is a corporate foundation, and we have just a few examples that we would like to share, and then we will come up with our suggestions for the future. Thank you very much, Professor Wang Yi, and he laid out grand thinking platforms about how we deal with the synergies between climate change and biodiversity. And as he said also, that civil society has a lot of experiments and actually best practices already. So this is a great platform to show them and to share and to learn as well. And the Yuanqing Foundation, there are two subtle examples I'd like to share. One that since 2013, we worked with the Mount Chumulama Conservation Bureau. It's a government agency to work on the protection of snow leopards in that region. We focus primarily in that past 7 years on the scientific research and a little bit on capacity building, community engagement, and public education, environmental education. Turns out after the 11 years work that we realized the work has to be placed in a larger context, which is the climate change. Definitely is affecting the Mount Chumulama, the Tibetan Plateau, and also biodiversity in that region. So 2 months ago, the board of the Vancouver Foundation has just approved the next 5-year strategic plan for our work in that area, that we will focus on the local capacity building for community engagement with the protection of the biodiversity in the concept of the climate change in the Tibetan Plateau area. And the other example is that the foundation is based in Shenzhen. It's a coastal area in China next to Hong Kong. We started working on first community solid waste management. And then we started to build the near-zero carbon emission community. And in that process, we realized that to engage people to participate in that green behavior, biodiversity is a good tipping point. That people, community people, as citizens, as consumers, together in that community, as they are more interested in biodiversity in the region, they like to invest in their community, including they encourage their kids to be involved in environmental issues. So actually, we turned this carbon-focused community efforts into a combination through a channel of encouragement through biodiversity engagement. So we support NGOs in that area to carry out like the field researchers through take a photo and post it on the website and show how your community is biodiverse, and those kind of effects that has turned out to be good success. So with the two examples, I would like to suggest that the NGOs and the non-state actors, we tend to work from the practice. And we have traditional log frame to work with. And in that process, we actually need to think more about how to frame the issue, how to frame the previous projects into the new concept, which is climate change and biodiversity. And so that's why we are eager to learn more through COP27, COP15 next month. And also in addition to IPCC report, also we would like to learn more experiences in all different parts of the world. So I look forward to hearing more best practices from Africa, Latin America, Asia, a lot of other countries, best practices from TNC and a few other organizations next. Thank you very much for the invitation. I look forward to, and I'm sure that it will be a success event. Look forward to hearing more and learning from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Chen Yumei. And we would like to have another call organization, SE Foundation, Dr. Yang Biao. Yang Biao also the chairman of Protected Nature Area Islands for Public Affairs. He will give us the opening remarks from the internet.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everyone. welcome to the side event enormous contribution and global collaboration for climate change and biodiversity synergies. I'm Yang Biao, Secretary General of SE Foundation. I'm very happy with the Green Carbon Foundation and other organizations to hold this side event. Due to the other things, I go back to China, so I very regret couldn't stay here with all of you participate these side events. As we all know, addressing biodiversity loss can reduce the damage caused by climate risk and natural disaster, the protection and the restoration of ecosystems, including forests, grasslands, wetlands, and oceans, contributions not only to the achievement of the post-2020 global biodiversity target, but also actively contribute to the Paris Agreement. The SE Foundation, established by the Society of Entrepreneurs and Ecology Conservation in 2008, is committed to funding and supporting the non-government environmental protection organization in China and creating a social protection platform with the participation of entrepreneurs, environmental NGOs, and the public to promote economic protection and sustainable development. Although the foundation has not been established for a long time with the rapid economic growth of China in recent years and awakening of public aware of environmental protection, the SE Foundation has been working closely with the responsible business and environmental organizations in China using a principle MBS to carry out a range of work on biodiversity conservation and addressing climate change. So we have a lot of achievements. The first is with the support of SE member companies and the public, more than 100 organizations has been funded to work on the conservation of 120,000 square kilometers of three river source, conduct pilot restoration of degraded grasslands in Jiatang, Qinghai, Ruogai grasslands to promote grassland restoration with the support of HSBC, Taobao, and Alibaba's carrying merchants. Approximate 800 hectares of Asian elephant and giant panda habitats, inland and coastal wetland ecosystem restoration will carry out. The third, conducting conservation monitoring research public of 26 rare and endangered species such as Puxiong salamander, wood snipe, and mouse deer. The fourth one, analyze and identify conservation gap area of migratory birds, carry out patrolling and monitoring 7,100 times in more than 100 sites, recording 240,000 data, involve more than 700 bird species, joint protect more than 4,000 square kilometers habitat of birds. The fourth one is with the support of Ant Forest, established 5 public welfare protect areas for Chinese pangolin, giant panda, leopard, and other feline in Guangdong, Sichuan, Ningxia, and Tibet, covering a total area of 36,000 hectares as a supplement to a national protected area system. Activities of patrolling, monitoring, natural education, and community development have been carried out in these areas. Ladies and gentlemen, biodiversity and climate change are both critical factors impacting on human survival and sustainable development. Let's work together, strengthen our cooperated and continue to play our role in combating climate change and biodiversity loss. Thank you all and best wishes for a wonderful time here. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mr. Yang Biao. And he was right now in Chengdu. Okay, next we will go to the second section. Thank you a lot for Professor Wang Yi and Yimei. You have go to the seat, have a rest. Thank you a lot for support. So, it's my honor to introduce our presentation part guest. The first one is Angela Andrade, Chair, IUCN Commission on Ecosystem Management. Angela, thank you. You can have a seat here. And I would like to invite the next one, Pulan Kaluda, Executive Director of EcoTrust. And Dong Ke, Director of China Global Engagement, Asia Pacific Conservation, the Nature Conservancy. And the last one is Dr. Matt Greger, Climate Change Director, Wild Aid. Okay. China Green Carbon Foundation, right now we are the leading NGO and foundations in China. During the last year CBD COP20, CBD 15, China Green Carbon Foundation announced our volunteer target. Together with domestic and foreign partners, CGCF commits to actively promote development and the implementation of biodiversity while addressing climate change and promote the best practice of nature-based solutions for a coordinated response to the crisis of biodiversity loss and climate change crisis by 2030. CGCF also commits to raise at least RMB 200 millions to support US dollar CNY to support collaborated actions on biodiversity conservation and address climate change in China. As we know, IUCN released the guidelines and standard of NBS, and we would like to invite Angela give us a presentation of how to apply the guidelines and standard of the nature-based solution. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you very much for your invitation to participate in this important event. For IUCN, it's really quite important to make awareness of the importance of addressing all the societal challenges that we have nowadays interacting. And it's not just biodiversity and climate change, but of course they are very much linked. But as we can see, all the problems that the world are facing today are completely interlinked. So this is why we need to have and provide an integrated response to those challenges to reduce future impacts and trade-offs that may affect the environment and the societies. So the main challenges that the IUCN proposal of the global standard are addressing climate change adaptation and mitigation, disaster risk reduction, biodiversity loss, ecosystem degradation, human health, food security, water security, among others. But the most important message is the need to address all these global challenges in an integrated manner. So we will see how the IUCN global standard responds to those. So I apologize that there are some text in Spanish, but I made a translation early this morning. So the foundation of nature-based solutions for IUCN is framed on the ecosystem approach as adopted by the Convention on Biological Diversity more than 20 years ago. So the ecosystem approach is provides the scientific basis for nature-based solutions. And since then, since the ecosystem approach was adopted, IUCN has been working in several areas that are very much related to that, like forest landscape restoration, natural infrastructure, ecosystem-based adaptation, ecological engineering, green infrastructure, just to highlight some of them. So back in 2016, IUCN members adopted the definition of nature-based solutions, which is quite similar from the definition that was recently endorsed by UNEA, which is excellent for us because it provides really a greater political support to mainstream our work on nature-based solutions. In 2016, the definition was adopted together with a set of principles, and those principles come from different initiatives that were developed by or co-work with IUCN, like ecosystem-based adaptation, like even the ecosystem approach as well, principles of eco-DRR and others, and we found some clear synergies in several topics that are the foundation of the NBS global standard. And we will see these connections later. So why to develop a global standard? Because we need to ensure a common understanding and interpretation of what nature-based solutions is and what's not, and make sure that all sectors, users, geographies all over the world have the same understanding. Also create a learning framework to improve and learn from the experiences in the field, provide quality control, because we really would like to guarantee good quality interventions on nature-based solutions based on existing relevant tools, approaches, and methods, minimizing the risks to an unsustainable use of nature, contribute to sustainability, create a global user community. That's something I will speak later on that, and contribute to a shared vision for a just and sustainable world. So the IUCN Global Standard includes 8 criteria and 28 indicators, and also the main categories of the Global Standard refer to conservation, to restoration, and the promotion of sustainable practices. I will just have a very quick overview to the main criteria and invite you to read and to study in more detail the criteria and indicators. It's very important because, and something that we are always highlighting, is that all the criteria and indicators have to be addressed. It's not that I pick the ones which I feel that are better than the other ones, because we will see that in the long term there may be negative results or adverse effects that we don't want in our society or in our environment. So this is extremely important, and we all know that in many experiences, I personally have been working for many years on ecosystem-based adaptation, and when working on the standard, there are certain topics that we realized that were missing. So we are learning from other experiences, making sure that NBS, that is community-led, that is nature-based, are really connected. So the first criteria is focused on responding to societal challenges effectively. So for that, we need to make sure that the challenges are clearly documented, and so there are some guidelines to do that. The second one is the nature-based solutions standard is bottom-up. It's something that is built locally, and is connected with different governance layers, but it's important to highlight the need to have a landscape basis, because we are usually working on specific projects or interventions, but what is happening next to our project area may be affecting our initiative, our site, our intervention. So the importance of adopting a landscape approach is extremely important, and making sure that we are really connecting economy, society, ecosystems, and that we can really incorporate and identify management risks that are beyond our project area or intervention. These connections are really important. A third point that is very much related with the discussion that we have today in this event is the need to make sure that we are generating biodiversity net gain and ecosystem integrity. This is extremely important because we are all here talking mainly about carbon storage in our ecosystems, even transform or natural ecosystems, but we in many occasions forget that carbon storage is underpinned by biodiversity and ecosystem services. So here we make a reference to the need to assess the level of integrity of our ecosystems. IUCN has also developed a complementary standard some years ago that is the red list of ecosystems that is highlighting and assessing the risk of collapse of our ecosystems. And nowadays, as we know, climate change is also affecting the integrity of ecosystems. It's not just land use, but also climate change. Another one is the fourth criteria refers to that nature-based solutions are economically viable. So here we have to make sure that we avoid externalities and that our interventions are fully supported by cost-benefit analysis, including initiatives like, for example, at some point, carbon markets or agreements for conservation, for restoration, but always making sure that we are working in an integrated manner. Also, the need to remove perverse incentives in many occasions. The fifth criteria focuses on the need to have base and inclusive transparent governance processes that are empowering communities. As I said, the nature-based solutions standard is bottom-up, so that it means that all the stakeholders, that the key local actors or all the people who are involved in any of these interventions are properly involved and engaged since the beginning of the intervention, and that they play a key role during the full process, including monitoring and follow-up activities. Another important topic is to make sure that, as we all know, any intervention that we implement may create trade-offs to the environment or to the communities or to the people in general. So the nature-based solutions standard also offers an opportunity to identify these trade-offs and to balance the trade-offs together with the stakeholders and communities. In many occasions, we are only focusing on the, let's say, kind of ecological or land use interventions, but we forget on what is happening with the communities or with the social component. So this is a key topic for a good implementation of the NBS standard. The NBS standard is, as we develop it, that it was a co-creation process with mainly led by the Commission on Ecosystem Management, the IUCN Secretariat, and members of the IUCN, is based on the best available science that we had when the standard was launched 2 years ago. But this is a process that can be adapted and improved through the evidence. And the evidence comes from science, from practices in the field, from community knowledge. So that's extremely important because this is the way to improve and to have more or have high quality MBS interventions that last in the territory. And finally, the MBS indicator is focused on the need to connect policies at different levels and make sure that there are regulatory frameworks to support the adoption and mainstreaming of nature-based solutions. The nature-based solutions standard is developed together with a self-assessment tool that is a way to show and highlight to what extent we are really accomplishing all the criteria and indicators. So as I mentioned, the standard is used for design, for scale-up, and for verification. And you can see in a traffic light manner how far or to what extent we are implementing in a right way the standard. And IUCN has also produced some documents that you can download it in our website. And the last thing I would like to mention is that we established an international standard committee that was adopted in the last COP in Glasgow. I have the honor to chair also the International Standard Committee of the Nature-Based Solutions. And we are meeting on a regular basis and making sure and safeguarding the standard and making sure that the standard is implemented, that we provide the right tools and ways to guarantee that is adopted. And so, yeah, this is where we are so far with the implementation. And we are really happy to have more people participating as members of the community of practice of the standard and providing your views, your contributions, but always based on experiences in the territory. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela. And I'm so glad you can so deeply introduce the standard of nature-based solution. And I would like to, next year, maybe I will tell the story how NGOs of China to apply this standard at once to promote more partners to using that kind as a very efficient tools to carry out. So I would like to invite next speakers, Pauline from the Eco Trust. Ms. Pauline is from the Environmental Conservation Trust of Uganda. It's a local conservation financing organization. Pauline is an expert in establishing and managing innovative conservation financing mechanism. And also, Eco Trust is based on the band financing model through which the public funding is used to leverage private and community investment. So give us topic is African CSOs collaborate on climate adaptation and biodiversity conservation.
Okay, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure for me to be speaking here on behalf of the Africa CSO Biodiversity Alliance. We are a group of about 80 CSOs that are based in Africa, and we came together during the COVID lockdown, and we had online discussions so that we can give voices to the local people so that their voices are heard in the processes around the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We have a vision that biodiversity thrives and underpins equitable and socially economic economically resilient livelihoods based on the rights of people to sustainably use their natural resources. And we are a very diverse network, IPLCs, research organizations, and we are also located all over Africa. But the common thread here is that we are Africa CSOs. We are not international CSOs. We are CSOs that are registered and work within African countries. We are very diverse. Some people have an annual budget of about $100,000 whereas some have like $3 million or up to $10 million. And we are engaged in different activities. We are also mostly membership organizations, and our membership ranges between 1,000 to 15,000. So we are really that diverse. We also work on a diversity of environmental issues. We engage with the UNFCCC, we engage with desertification. Some of us are in Latin America right now participating in the CITES. We are also gearing up to go and participate in the CBD discussions in Montreal. We work in aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems, but we mainly work with the frontline communities, and understanding their vulnerability, but also trying to work with them to come up with solutions that work for them. And our ideas, positions, and contributions in these meetings are normally based on dialogue. We conduct research, but we also share our ideas with other networks. We've had meetings with the European Union, we've had meetings with the Africa Development Bank, we also co-hosted an event with them. We have engaged with the Africa Group of Negotiators, and we've also worked with the CSO group in China. And this is us. We participated at the IUCN Global Conference. One of the things that I would like to highlight is that we have been very instrumental in creatively and innovatively mobilizing resources and delivering them where it matters at the right scale. There is a research that was conducted by IIED and other research organizations that indicated that only 1 out of every $10 that are dedicated to climate change gets to the ground. So we have put ourselves in that as the channel through which at least 60% of that money should be able to get to the communities that we are working with. But we have so many bottlenecks. We conducted some research on where our funding comes from, and for example, only 20% of us are able to access money directly to the multilateral and bilateral donors. So we access our money through intermediaries, through international NGOs, through foundations. So by the time it gets to us, we are in the 20% and then deliver only 10% eventually. Because even if we delivered 50% of what we get, yet we received only so much got lost in the pipeline. That survey that we conducted, we even mobilized more resources in our own internally generated revenue than the money that we access with the international, with the international NGOs. With the multilateral agencies, like what normally comes out of discussions such as this one. So we think that we need to engage more, even directly, remove many of those bottlenecks, so that we are able to deliver the money where it matters if we are to achieve even all these nature-based solutions that we are talking about. So we think that as a coalition, we present that vehicle that is able to deliver the money where it matters. But we also think that in these discussions, there should be a lot more clarity on the role of, for example, private voluntary markets, issues to do with fairness and equity in how this financing is delivered. But also, we are concerned about this nexus between biodiversity, climate change, but also and livelihoods. So for us, where we come from landscapes. We come from landscapes that need to be recarbonized, but these are landscapes that are biodiversity landscapes, but it's also the same landscapes on which we depend for our livelihoods. So it is not possible for us to separate one of the things from the three. So we would like to see our governments have very clear strategies in the NDCs on how this nexus links together. And also, we have also been following the nature-based solutions, and we do implement nature-based solutions, but we also believe that the message needs to go beyond. The message needs to go beyond, whereby whatever the solutions are called, they should be designed in a manner that does not harm biodiversity, whether they are labeled nature-based solutions or not. And we also would like a lot of emphasis on building the adaptive capacities of the African people. There has been a misconception on the people that we work with. Because the world has squeezed them into a corner because of the vagaries that come as being at the front line of climate change, and they resort to taking very short-term decisions, so the world views them as people that cannot contribute to long-term decisions. They've put them in that corner, they squeeze them in that survival mode, but then also they've developed a perception around them as if that is who they are. So even when the solutions are being developed, the solutions are being developed to be implemented on their behalf by other people because they are perceived to be people that cannot implement ideas on their own. So we think that as a group, we provide an opportunity to de-risk these relationships, to de-risk the relationships between the global community, including donors and communities that we represent. We have a platform through which we manage knowledge, but we are also able to demonstrate impact, and through the different partnerships that we have, we are able to aggregate actions across multiple countries to be able to achieve the scale that we are looking for. Thank you very much. I'll leave you with a picture of one of the people that we work with. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Pauline. It's very important to do the fundraising and to support get more money to support developing countries to carry out climate change, biodiversity collaboration. So next, I would like to invite one of the China's local NGO, very famous on-site NGOs, Shanshui Conservation Center, the executive director, Hou Yuanqing, tell us more about the Chinese implementation.
Thank you, Yuanqing. Hi, good morning, and I'm very honored to present our work with some voluntary contributions and the collaborations with partners about the integrated risk assessment and the synergy for biodiversity and climate change. First, I'm glad to introduce Shanshui Conservation Center. We are a Chinese NGO based in Beijing, and we have work around the country. We have conservation projects in the Tibetan Plateau, Sichuan Province, Yunnan Province, and also urban areas in Beijing and Shanghai. So basically, we are doing community-based conservation in Western China, but also we care about biodiversity and climate change targets, because all of these environment goals cannot be implemented without communities. First, I want to introduce some of the co-benefits of doing conservation with both climate and biodiversity benefits. First, climate and ecosystem, they interact and feedback in many ways. Climate change is one of the main threats to biodiversity, and the ecosystem health is very critical for a stable climate. And the policies and the projects can co-benefit both targets in many ways. First is the restoration approach. I think Angela has already mentioned about the forest, grassland, and wasteland carbon credit projects based on nature-based solutions. So one of our practice is doing the nature-based mitigation by forest restoration. This is a picture from Yunnan province, and we did the forest restoration with the communities, and the local communities can also benefit from the planting of the forest. The total carbon credit is 362.4 ton CE, and is supported by our partners. This is a kind of voluntary carbon credit projects. Second is the ecosystem-based adaptation from extreme events. This is from Tibetan Plateau. The communities are restoring grasslands because the Tibetan Plateau is suffering from the impact of climate change by droughts, snowstorms, floods, and other extreme events. So a strong and healthy grassland ecosystem is very important for them to adapt to climate change. So the climate change can be better adapted by a healthy grassland ecosystem. They restore the grassland and also do the rotate grazing. With the better management, we are able to do a voluntary carbon sink projects. Thirdly, there are other conservation actions. We also have other multi-benefit actions. For example, we are doing the forest conservation in Tibet in the Yalun Zambo Canyon. This is the tropical forest in Tibet. It's also a hotspot of many species, for example, the clouded leopards and many other species. By conserving the forest, we can prevent deforestation, mitigate the carbon sink, and also we can protect the wildlife habitat. So these are some of the co-benefits of climate and biodiversity. But however, there are also trade-offs. For example, many clean energy industry also have some local impact to the biodiversity, like wind power, and the hydropower stations and the solar panels. They may also reduce the vegetations locally, and they may interact with the birds. So many of the flying birds may glide into the wind power and the electricities. So there is certain risks for biodiversity. However, we think there is not choosing only one aspect, right? We need to have a comprehensive risk assessment. So we can trade off between maybe satisfying a small amount of place, but we can get climate benefit. The most important thing is that we should avoid the key ecological value areas. So that's why we need more data-based decision-making about the site selection, and also we need a lot of management of biodiversity. For example, we developed this tool for site selection. We call it the Biodiversity Impact Assessment Tool. You can visit this with this website, bia.highnature.cn. We developed this tool so that people can choose the place and explore whether there are key habitat to wildlife or is there key protected areas. So you should not choose this site. Maybe in another site without that sensitive areas, you can consider a clean energy industry. So This is one tool to help industry and decision makers, policymakers to do a right choice. And secondly, you can do the conflict management. We collaborate with the state-grade corporation of China about the birds and the collections of the electricities. So we build some nests of birds and make some equipment on the electricity constructions, so they will avoid the birds to be killed because of the construction. So lastly, I want to mention the policy implementations. First, the climate policy making should have no regret or low regret principle for large-scale constructions. So we will avoid biodiversity loss while we are achieving climate actions, climate targets. Second, for biodiversity policy making, I think carbon credits should be considered for a sustainable financing for community conservation. And also, we hope the policymaker will consider a comprehensive environmental impact assessment to consider biodiversity, climate, and many environment targets into the environment impact assessment. And lastly, I think cooperation is the most important. So different partners, NGOs, private sectors, and the policymakers should collaborate together for the biodiversity and the climate change impact. And thanks you for listening.
Thank you, Xiangying. And next, we would like to invite Dr. Peng from GEI. GEI is a leading domestic NGO to help us to building the collaborative network for non-state actors to promote joint actions on climate change and biodiversity conservation. So,
thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Peng. I will go very fast because the time is very limited. Especially, I want to save some time for my colleagues right here. So today, I work for a GEI Global Environment Institute. Today, I want to just go back to our topic about global collaboration. So my topic is building collaborative networks of long-state actors to promote joint action, especially in the sensors on the climate change and biodiversity. So GEI is a Chinese NGO. It's a China-based NGO, and we have a project across 15 countries, especially in Southeast country and also in Africa. So, yeah, my topic is about long-state actors, how we can just promote or enhance the cooperation between the non-state actors, especially in China and other countries. So, you know, in the past researches, we know NGOs, private sectors, and other companies use women's, they play very important roles on the global environmental governance too. According to this table, we can say so much interactive between these NGOs and the different little works. So if we focus on these two, themes about the UNFCCC COP27 and the CBD COP15, we can find one key word as together. Why we need it together for implementation, why we need it together for building a shared future for all the life on the earth. This is the different topics between the CBD and the UNFCCC. So what do we do? What we did in the past few years? First, since we established the Alliance of Civil Protected Area in 2017 in China, we connected more than 27 right now, 27 NGOs, foundings, and other stakeholders together to build an alliance. This alliance's objective is to protect 1% of China's land. This also includes Alibaba and other foundations like this people. So far, we have protected 51 areas. It's arrived 10,000 square kilometers in China. And we also built another alliance. We call it a civil society alliance for biodiversity conservation. It's initiated by 8 NGOs working in China and supported by MEE, Ministry of Ecology and Environment. And we launched non-state actors' voluntary commitments. This is just meet to the Shamsa-Yihe to Kunming action agenda for nature and people. So far, there's this, from China, there's 57 commitments or pledges come from China. That's account for 10%, more than 10% of global, and arrived to 80% of Asia and the Pacific pledges. And we also launched 100 plus global biodiversity best practice and host the CBD COP15 NGOs forum in Kunming with this alliance CSABC. This is last year, we hold the COP15 NGO forum and initiated 2.25 billion RMB pledges to biodiversity and climate change adaptation. Third one is platform for China-Africa CSO dialogue on biodiversity conservation. The Pauline just mentioned about that. So we have lots of work and activities in the past 2 years. For example, we have 7 dialogue and exchanges. We have joint projects in exhibition, visiting, exchanging, and many other joint projects. And we also have joint impacts on the different situations and conferences. And we will also establish another one, we call it East and Southeast Asia Community Conservation Network. It includes NGOs from 8 countries from Southeast China and Southeast Asia and China. So according to this network, we also do pilot work in Myanmar for 27 communities over there. And we're also in Indonesia, in Philippines, in Laos. Thank you very much. We have this, I think this is very, very quick, but I think this is a very main networks and corporations. You can, next month, we will go to the Montreal, and you can find the CBD, how we can just implement this cooperation continually. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Peng Kui. So next, we would like to invite Director Dong Ke from the Nature Conservancy. Tell us more about the TNC's global best practice and let us to learn to know how to learn from that.
Thank you, Yuanqing. I would like to begin my presentation with my sincere thanks to Green Carbon Foundation, GEI, Shanshui, and Yuanqing, and many other organizations to put this together. Thank you so much. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to share some practices and also experience from TNC on how we address this climate and biodiversity connected crisis, and also how do we find the connected solutions. So I would like to basically share with you a few alarming numbers. The first one is, so since 1950, three-quarters of CO2 emissions are driven by humans. And second, since 1970, so 70% of the average decline of birds, amphibians, mammals, and fish and reptile. So these two alarming numbers, they are not coming together accidentally. So as Xiangying just mentioned, so climate change is one of the major drivers for biodiversity loss. So as we know, I think there are more than 130 countries made a commitment to achieve carbon neutrality in the mid of this century. We truly believe that without the nature positive, no way we can achieve net zero or carbon neutrality. So we have to work on this nature. So for TNC, we focus our work on the following 4 areas. So the first one is the frontline communities. We definitely would like to put the people at the center of our conservation work. So second, we are working on the protecting, managing, and the restoration of the ecosystems. So third, again, the renewable energy transition. We definitely need a low carbon society and the economy, but how we could work together to address this climate change and the biodiversity through this renewable energy transition. And last one is money. So innovative finance, so how to leverage, mobilize more money to work on this climate change and the biodiversity. So I just want to give you some examples regarding the frontline communities. So in general, the frontline communities or local communities, they manage the land home to 80% of the planet's biodiversity. So this is a picture, that's the Papua New Guinea women group. So TNC is working with this women group called the Mangrove Market Women. So as we all know, that mangrove is so important for these local communities, not only to sort of prevent this land runoff, also sort of help them to reduce the storm surge. But in the meantime, the mangrove also provide habitat for fish and the shrimp. So the local women, PNG community, so basically they are responsible for 60 to 80% of the food production. So they have the motivation to protect the land, mangrove. So we work with this women group and to restore this mangrove and also kind of contribute to this biodiversity and the climate, because we still strongly believe this photosynthesis is still the cheapest way to absorb the carbon dioxide from this, the atmosphere. Second one is protecting, managing, and restoring nature. So some of you may have already know this number. So 1/3 of this global emission reduction needed can be provided by this natural climate solution by 2030. And they are also this cost-effective way. So we are working with the Australian indigenous rangers. I think some of you may still remember that in 2019 and 2020, the bushfire. And so we fight the fire with this, we fight a fire with fire. So basically, we use this traditional ecological knowledge with the latest fire science to help deliver the fire program. So basically, our local rangers strategically place small fires at the right time of the year, which burn cool and low, which also benefits some biodiversity as well, so to prevent the big fire. And this one, renewable energy transition. And I also want to show this number. So 2/3 of the electricity generation needs to be renewable by 2030 if we want to achieve this Paris Agreement. So for TNC, we set up this program called the Great Plains Renewable Energy Initiative in the US. It covers several states. So we use the 3 principles. So the first one is this rooftop solar. So basically, we promote more renewable energy development, starting with a low impact distribution generation, such as the roof and the community solar. So second one is the set it right, which means we advance and utilize the best available science, define criteria for low impact setting, development tools. I think Xiangying mentioned that a little bit too. I hope we can apply some of the tools in China and compare notes. The third area is offset impacts. So in some areas, so the impacts can't be avoided. So if in that area, we promote the compensation mitigation solutions to protect the species and the habitats, and protecting and restoring priority conservation areas. So innovative finance, I think in 2019 and 2020, TNC, Cornell University, and the Peng Institute, we worked together to develop this report. So we found out that by 2030, we need 700 billion annual financing gap to invest in the nature. So we definitely need to mobilize more. And so this is an example that, so basically TNC worked with Seychelles and a few other cases to use these debt for nature swaps to protect the ocean, basically from this 0.04% of exclusive economic zone to 30% in the Seychelles, which is really exciting, and result in 21 million repayment of a foreign debt in exchange for in-country financing for long-term conservation. So we are very proud of this innovative mechanism. I hope some of these practices can be applied in China, and also we are looking forward to learning the experience from China as well. Thank you very much for this great opportunity.
Thank you a lot, Dongke. And next we will invite Matt from the Wild Aid and tell us more about how to using the media to promote awareness, public awareness for conservation, and also promote the people participate the climate change actions in the cities.
So you just use this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello. Hello. I'm Matt Greger. I am Climate Program Director at Wild Aid, and I'm going to talk to you about behavior change communications campaigns and their role in biodiversity and climate change. I'm quite a bit taller than everybody else. Can you hear me okay? A little bit? Okay. There we go. Wild Aid is the world's leading environmental communicator. Thank you, much better. Wild Aid is the world's leading environmental communicator. We reach hundreds of millions of people every year with our messages on sustainability and conservation, with tens of millions of people reporting significant behavior changes based on our campaigns. By far, our largest and most successful communications campaigns are in China. Our communications model relies on high-end creative advertising, pro bono media distribution, and celebrity ambassadors. And over the last 20 years, we've run successful campaigns to preserve elephants, rhinos, sharks, turtles, tigers, pangolins, biodiversity in general, and a whole lot more. Most of those campaigns have a focus on reducing or fighting the poaching crisis. But as my colleagues have noted, poaching is no longer the largest threat to biodiversity and iconic species. Climate change is. So, for the past 10 years, we have taken this successful communications model and turned it on rising emissions from consumer behavior. So we've launched campaigns in China on home energy use, transportation, single-use plastics, dietary choices, and a lot more. Here's an example of one of our campaigns from 2020 where actor Wang Yibo is promoting sustainable diets all across China. This and all of our other recent campaigns have been co-launched by China Green Carbon Foundation, so we would like to thank them for their support and partnership as well. Now, I'd also like to point out that our climate campaigns have been equally successful to our species-related campaigns. This Sustainable Diets campaign that you just saw reached 1.6 billion views over a couple months, with 30 million people reporting making more sustainable dietary choices. In 2021, our campaign on single-use plastics reached almost 900 million views, with 40 million people reporting that they would reduce their dependence on single-use plastics based on our campaigns. Now, why do we think consumer behavior change is important for fighting climate? Well, the first is that it can make a big impact. This year, the UN IPCC report included a chapter on demand-side measures for the first time, where they estimated that 40 to 70% of all emissions could be eliminated by 2050 through consumer behavior change. The second is that our model is uniquely placed to make this impact. So our friends at Rare Conservation have done some research that shows individuals actually have a high level of belief in the importance of their own climate action. That's represented by the red line on this chart. But they have a low level of belief that other people also believe climate action is important. That's represented by the middle vertical black bar on that line. According to Rare, the single biggest thing that anyone can do to catalyze climate action is to bring that black line more in line with the red line, or what we call increasing the perceived social expectation of climate action. When we put all this research together, we have a three-step model that involves climate awareness, climate action, and climate culture. We increase the awareness of the role of consumers in both the problem and solution to climate change. We give them the tools and engagement to make significant changes in their own life through climate action. And then when those actions add up and people in society are seeing other people make those changes, and those changes are reinforced by the visibility and ubiquity of our advertising, that's when the climate culture can change. Of course, we can't do this alone. We have partners all across China and all over the world that help us in every way. I wish I had time to list all of them, but we must keep going. As far as climate campaigns go, we launch a new one about every 6 months to 1 year. In late September of this year, we launched Find Your Climate Action, which you see behind you. It features famous actor Wu Lei, who is the star of China's most popular drama, Love Like the Galaxy. The idea behind this campaign is to provide not only inspiration but tools for individuals to identify their own climate action in their life that makes the most sense for them. In Wu Lei's case, that's cycling. I am going to skip the TV PSA in order for time to keep moving. But of course, WildAid does more than just advertising. This year, hundreds of thousands of business leaders attended our webinars on how they could implement climate action in their business plans through sustainable design and in the housing industry. We released a climate action handbook here at COP, which not only identifies the behavioral obstacles to individual climate action, but provides a roadmap for individuals to take the next step on their climate journey. We created an online hub where people can co-create content, share with friends and family, and inspire others to take action. And we've done in-depth behavioral research with Tsinghua University to build a further research foundation for our climate campaigns. Now, the last thing that I would like to share with you today is that I'm very excited that for the first time, WildAid will be taking all of the lessons that we've learned over 10 years of campaigning in China to the United States. So in January 2023, WildAid will be launching its first ever US-focused climate campaign. So far, we've received $10 million in pro bono advertising in the 25 largest markets in the United States. We've recruited the ad agency of the year from 2021 to run our celebrity and social influencer campaign on social media. And we've worked with the best creative agencies in New York City to design and message our advertising campaigns. So next year, if you're in the United States, keep an eye out for our campaign called the Environment Excuse, which will encourage people to reduce their food waste by stealing their roommates' leftovers. Encourage them to reduce their flight miles by skipping the corporate offsite that they didn't want to go to anyway. And encourage them to turn down the thermostat at home by increasing their body heat. So this and about 5 other executions of key climate actions will be appearing in the 25 largest markets across the United States. If you happen to see them, please do let us know what you think. I'm Matt Greger. My colleague Duan is here as well. Please reach out to us if you're interested or talk to us after the event. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Matt, and we will quickly remove to next station, the panel discussion sections. I will give my moderator to Xiangying, director, and invite all of the panelists to come sit down here. Welcome.
Thank you all of the speakers. And we are going to have a panel discussion on global collaboration on climate change and biodiversity conservation. Please welcome Wang Xiangyi from China Association for NGO Cooperation, Zenan from Natural Resource Defense Council, NRDC, Collins Chava from African Wildlife Foundation, and Mr. Nobi from Nature Conservation Egypt. Welcome. Thank you all for coming to the stage, and we are very glad to have this panel. Because of the time limit, I will just ask for one question, and each of you please give us a 3-minute speech about this question. So my question is about, we have talked about all of the voluntary contributions, and what do you think is the challenges in practicing and the collaboration of biodiversity and climate change actions? Maybe Xiangyi, can you first address this question?
Okay, thank you, Xiangyi. For the challenge, I think I would like to share 3 points. First one is the capacity of Chinese NGOs to involve in climate change and biodiversity conservation is needed to be strengthened. Second point is the synergies between NGOs still need to strengthen, it's not enough. And the third one is the funding to support climate change and biodiversity conservation NGOs is not enough and not sustainable. So these 3 points, thank you.
Thank you, Xiangyi. Next, please, Zenan, can you? Yes.
I'll just go through these slides. And I made a slides this morning, and because I really want to re-enjoy some critical moments from NBS. Where is it? Okay. Yeah, because I really want to share this critical moment which happened in the last 2 weeks in this COP27. And so the first one is yesterday that IUCN and the COP27 presidency and the government of Germany, they launched the initiative in Biodiversity Day, so which bring the coherence to and stress collaboration between existing NBS efforts and partnerships. So I'm not going to go through the whole detail, but it's really exciting partnership. And another thing is like on November 8, which is the second day of COP27, and U.S. Biden administration released the NBS nature-based solution roadmap, and also a companion with kind of nature-based solution resource guide, so which highlight 5 strategic pillars for how to make the best use of nature-based solution in America's nature loss or climate change. And so if we look at another side, so there are still some continuous outside voices. We must listen to them. You know, I'm an enthusiastic of nature-based solution, but I want to hear some objections from NBS, because that is where we can improve our work on NBS, you know. So this picture also from yesterday, the biodiversity day, and I think you know, because there are some critical language for NBS for now, like if they call NBS a greenwashing, then you should establish effective policy mechanism and legislations to avoid greenwashing. And if they call NBS a buzzword, then you should do some deep research on NBS. I mean, yeah, we should really listen to those objectives of nature-based solution. So here I'm not gonna go through this detail. I just think all of the stakeholders should really work together to implement a nature-based solution. And I also want to introduce I also bring some copies for this executive summary. Is from our research with the Chinese Academy of Environmental Planning. If you are interested in it, please reach out to me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Zanan. Okay, Mr. Colin, can you make a very brief, like 2 minutes speech? Thank you.
So thank you very much. I would like to thank the China Green Carbon Foundation for the invitation and the GEI for the nice invitation. Thank you very much. My name is Khaled Noubi. I'm here to represent Nature Conservation Egypt. It's an Egyptian NGO. We work mainly to conserve natural heritage in Egypt through science, advocacy, awareness, and environmental education. And of course, as any local NGO, we work in a local context, we have challenges. One of the most well-known challenges for all NGO action and activism is the availability of funds. This is already well addressed and identified, so I will not talk about this. But also we have another challenge that we are concerned with more, which is who has the right to set the priorities for action and the framework of action and the philosophy of action. The history of environmental movement in the world resulted in a situation that all conservation ideology, philosophy, frameworks, concepts, and best practice are being produced mainly in a Western context, being adopted first, and then in the developing countries, the NGOs try to fit their priorities within those predefined concepts and ideologies and philosophy. So this is a little bit challenging. We are trying in NCE to set a list of priorities that makes more sense to the Egyptian people, for example, in Egypt, and then to attract possible funds and technical support for this. So we are trying not to be a reactor to the global agendas, which is totally fine, but it doesn't necessarily cover the local needs and the areas for actions in developing countries. So we are trying to do this through partnership mainly, and we are the BirdLife partner in Egypt, and this is actually our DNA. We work with a big global network of more than 120 partners all over the world to try to get a synergy in actions and to make sure that we deliver actions that have an impact globally. We're talking about flyways conservation, big migration, movement of birds conservation, and so on. But that's not everything. We are also very, very keen to build partnership with African countries, with African NGOs. That's why I'm here representing also, I'm being here as an ACBA member that we are proud of, because we believe also the South-South partnership and cooperation is very, very vital and key factor to deliver a success.
Thank you, Colin. Mr. Nobi, please.
Okay. Thank you so much for this invitation. My name is Colin Shawa from the African Wildlife Foundation, and I will just respond to your question, which you mentioned about the challenges that are there in terms of the nexus of the three. But I would just say that one of the key things that is lacking is the money or the financial flows to indigenous people and to local communities and to local community organizations, which are the custodians of biodiversity in Africa. These are the largest communities that have the largest vast of land they are protecting, but the money is not reaching to that end, and this is a major problem within the global financial infrastructure. But we also see that in terms of governance, our structures are not well equipped to deal with issues of climate change and biodiversity together. You can see that in governance structures, for example, in other countries in Africa, these things are implemented on a linear basis without those interconnections. And it's one of the key things that is also affecting the implementation and also the implementation of nature-based solutions at local level. And also the sidelinement of the local government in Africa, where the national governments prioritizes and maps up the ways of implementation. Also affects the way even the local governments also